I'm not able to move this piece. All right, so I'll stop sharing. Jackie, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Sure. Just let me know once you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So, guys, good morning and welcome to Noida Mulesoft Meetup. So, agenda for today's meetup is like we have already have an introduction. Then we will discuss about Anypoint Datagraph. So, we will going to use some of the use cases where we can use Anypoint Datagraph. Then we will see what are the restriction and the limitation with Anypoint Datagraph. Then also we will see like there is few limitation how we can overcome those limitation with Anypoint data graph and API manager. Basically we will see one example like in Anypoint data graph we cannot apply like JWT validation policies or like any other kind of policy which is available with API manager, but I have found one solution through which we can do that. So I will share that in today's session. Then finally we will have a networking and wrap up basically. Okay. So it guys, like it will take around 1 hour to complete the session, or maybe some 1 hour 10 minutes around, or maybe something around that. So please stay with me. So let me start first of what is a GraphQL basically. So GraphQL is nothing. It's a graph query language. It's a query language for your REST API. It's a similar like we have a like query language for databases, right? So you have a database. So database have a table have a column, and if you say select star from this particular table, it will fetch all the data basically, right? If you say select some fields from this database, it will fetch it will fetch the fields which you want. Then you use the join. If you want to fetch the data from multiple data sets or multiple data table, you use the joins, right. So same kind of things we can perform with the graph query language basically. I will going to show you with the demonstration. So graph query language, it's completely open source, and like it is a query language for your REST APIs basically. It is developed by Facebook in 2012, and finally it become the open source publicly. It got released publicly in 2015. So it's nothing, it's a query language for your API. You can send a query to your API, right? And you can get the required data. So one of the most important thing with the GraphQL, you can get, what response you will get back. Like you will get a predictable result back to your predictable result back basically. So basically you can request what are the fields you want. So instead of getting large payload, you can say I want this these three fields. I want field card number, I want account ID, I want XYZ. I just want these three fields, right? I don't want the whole payload. So what advantage we will get here? So it will reduce the network congestion also, right? It will reduce the traffic, right? Because let's consider if you are requesting the if you are calling some API, it is responding back with a huge payload which is of like 1 MB. But let's consider like I just want three fields. Then why you will request like full 1 MB payload? In that case you just can request three fields and which is of 1 KB. So definitely it will definitely reduce the traffic congestion also. So if you see, REST API are very powerful, and it always follow resource oriented and well structured approach. So basically you aware like, so REST API is everything is about resources, right? So it always follow the resource oriented approach. So basically, but the situation become complex when you want to do the call to the multiple APIs. So basically, let's consider you may come into situation where you have to fetch the data from multiple APIs or multiple data sets, right? In that case, your API become complex. Basically, you have to write the logic where you can do the orchestration of call to your API, like to multiple APIs, and like get the data. Then finally you aggregate that data and then send to the client. So this become like you have to write lot of code for that. First you have to write the choreography of the call or orchestration of the call. Then you have to you have to fetch the data from multiple APIs. Then there might be situation like you are calling the three API, one API is not responding and two APIs responding, right? In those cases you have to do the proper error handling, and all those kind of things needs to be handled by you, right? So so with GraphQL, you can avoid that. So basically you can do some configuration and you can write some small code so to achieve all these things basically. So you can just simply write the query. In query that query is capable of calling the multiple APIs, and that GraphQL is capable of aggregating the data and send back those data to the client basically. Apart from that, the one of the most advantage of GraphQL is that GraphQL is capable of aggregating the data and return the predictable data to the client. What does this mean? Basically, as I mentioned, so basically GraphQL can call the multiple API, it can aggregate the data and it send back to the client. What about the predictable data? So client can request what are the fields it required to the APIs or to the just to the APIs basically, or to the GraphQL. So it can send the request to the GraphQL. I want these three fields. The GraphQL will do all traversing, parsing, and the retrieval or modifying the data, and then later it's sent back to the client. So you don't have to do anything basically. Okay. So let me. So this is all about GraphQL. So in simple terms, so GraphQL is nothing. It's a query language. So client can send the query to the GraphQL, and depending on the query, the GraphQL will return data back to the client basically, right? The second thing, the GraphQL is capable of traversing, retrieving, or modifying the data. The GraphQL can do the aggregation of data. The GraphQL can return the predictable data to the client. So these are some advantage of GraphQL. So Mulesoft recently come up with concept called Anypoint Datagraph. So Anypoint Datagraph is a layer which is built on the top of on the concept of GraphQL basically. Okay, so it underlying layer is a GraphQL basically. So what is an Anypoint Datagraph? So Anypoint Datagraph is an optional component in your Anypoint platform. Okay, which allow you to unify the multiple API into a single data service. So what does this mean? So basically, you may have a multiple API deployed to the cloud hub or runtime manager basically. And with the Anypoint data graph, what you can do, you can unify all the API into single data service. So you will get a single endpoint. You will get a single Anypoint data graph endpoint where you can send the request, and later Anypoint data graph will take care which API needs to be called depend on the query. So you don't have to you don't have to have a multiple endpoints. You simply have a single data service endpoint. So Anypoint data graph provide a single data service endpoint which can be used to send the request to Anypoint data graph, and Anypoint data graph will take care of like which API needs to be called. If we need to call multiple APIs, so everything will be taken care by the Anypoint data graph. Okay, so Anypoint data graph is a uniform platform for APIs to design and develop and manage. It allows to discover, manage, and serve the data from multiple API using the single data graph request. Okay, so it means it provides a graphical user interface where you can configure your you can unify your APIs into a single data service. Okay, and it also capable of calling the multiple APIs using a single request. So you can, in single query, you can tell, I want field from this API, I want field from this API, I want field from this API. Send that query or send that query to Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph will do the orchestration of call. Once the result come back, Anypoint data graph will do the aggregation of data and send the response back to the client. So those kind of things can be taken care of by Anypoint data graph. You don't have to write a single line of code. It's complete configuration. You don't have to write a single line of code also. This reduce lot of developer of efforts to call the multiple APIs and aggregate the response. And with Anypoint data graph, you can request only data you want, no more or no less. So definitely, let's consider, if you are developing this particular scenario, it may take 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. You have to do a lot of testing and all those things, right? And you have to also ensure all the you have all implemented the proper error handling, all those kind of things, right? But with Anypoint data graph, even you don't have to implement the error handling. It is come of like it is part of Anypoint data graph basically. Okay, so those kind of things you can be taken care at Anypoint data graph. And one of the important thing, you can request only data you want. So it will you want three field, just request three field. So these are the benefits we get from Anypoint data graph. Any question till now? No, right? Okay, so I will move ahead. So what are the advantages of Anypoint data graph? So as I mentioned, so unify the multiple API into a single data service. So basically you will get a single data service graph, any GraphQL endpoint, okay, which you can use to send the request, to send the query, and that particular endpoint will do the orchestration, like aggregation, everything is like everything will be taken care by this particular data service. With Anypoint Datagraph, you can serve the data from multiple underlying API with a single request without writing any code, right? We have already discussed this. So for calling multiple API for aggregating the data, you don't have to write a single line of the code. Basically, it's complete configuration. Basically, you can easily consume the data from multiple APIs using single request, right? So developer it's don't doesn't have to write any code basically to pass the data from multiple APIs basically. Okay, so you don't have to write a single line of code also. So apart from that, Anypoint Data Graph is managed service, so you don't have to worry about the patching, underlying hardware, scalability, all those kind. You don't have to worry. This is the managed service, so you don't have to worry about the platform. You just have to worry about the application and data. So you don't have to worry about the underlying hardware. You don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. So those things will be taken care by the Mulesoft itself, right? So you can request the data what you want basically, right? So no more no less basically. It reduces the development efforts, and like it's a managed data service where like no need to worry about underlying infrastructure and the maintenance basically, right? So yeah, so let me explain few of the use case. Like before that, if anybody have any question,
So, Jitendra, how about the security of the
I will come
API?
on that. I will
Okay.
definitely come on that. Yeah, like if you have any question on introduction, do you got like why we are going with what is the benefits we are getting from Anypoint data graph? Any question? Uh, Lalit, I will come on that. Like, let me explain the process API versus data graph, which is a good question. So basically, generally, if you see, like process API is generally used for implementing a business logic or implementing, or orchestration of call or choreography of call, right? So see, you cannot replace your process layer with any point data graph, but see let consider. I will give one scenario. If your data is complex and you want to do the complex data transformation, which cannot be done by any point data graph, right? Any point data graph cannot perform any kind of transformation. So this has to be like the transformation which have a huge business logic, right? So that transformation can be done at a process layer only. If you have a simple orchestration of the choreography of the call, in that case you can definitely ignore process API. But when you have a complex data transformation and any complex business logic, that cannot be handled by the Anypoint data graph. That has to be taken care in the process API. So Anypoint data graph doesn't completely replace your process API basically. If you have a business logic, if you have a complex routing, right? If you have some complex routing on depending on some business logic, if you have a complex data transformation, you need to use the process API. Lalit, is this, have you got my answer right? Or do, yeah, okay, okay, good. So let me consider one of the use case. So generally what we do, so let consider I have a mobile application, I have a web application. So if you see mobile application always require lesser field as compared to web application, right? But right, so generally what we do in such cases, so let's consider I have a desktop application or web application. So it wants 7 or 8 field, whereas mobile application want 4 field, right? So I have one API which is open banking API having 3 endpoints: account, balances, and the transaction. So my web application want this particular 7 field, whereas mobile application require a 4 field. In that case, like if we are not using any point data graph, what you will going to do? So basically in that case you will have a user experience layer where you will write two APIs. One is for mobile application, one is for web application. In mobile application you will return, or mobile app or mobile API you will return just 3 or 4 fields. In web API you will just return like 7 or 8 fields. Let in future mobile came again, mobile application want one extra field, right? So what you will do, you will do the code changes and you will deploy the again the experience layer, right? But with any point data graph you can avoid that. You have a single data service, you can request whatever field you want, whatever field you want to the Anypoint data graph, and Anypoint data graph will take care of all those things. So let's consider the scenario: you have a REST API that return 10 field in the response, but web application require only 7 field, whereas mobile application require only 4 field. In such cases, data graph is the one of the most optimal option, where client can pass the whatever data required as an input request, and data graph will return a required field or predictable result back to the web application and mobile application. Below is the illustration of use case 1. So in this case, I will not have a user experience layer. Basically, I will expose my Anypoint data graph endpoint, and I will unify this open banking API basically. uh, right, I will unify that open banking API. So what will happen now, I have a Anypoint data graph endpoint. So any channel, like it, let it be mobile channel or let it be web channel, so they can send the request to Anypoint data graph endpoint with this query. So with this body, basically with this query, so they can send the request to Anypoint data graph. Okay. So now here we are not having the separate API, we have a single data service endpoint which can be used by your mobile application, which can be used by your web application. So they are sending those requests to Anypoint data graph. So they are sending, web application saying I want 8 field, mobile application are saying I want 4 field. So those, so accounts will return all the fields to Anypoint data graph, and Anypoint data graph will ensure that like it return the fields which are requested by the specific channel basically. Okay. So this has to be, so account will return everything to Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph will take care of like what needs to be written to the consumer or to the client basically. Use case 1, let me show with demonstration. Any question before I go with demonstration? Yeah, Lalit, like yeah, you are right. Like see, like you can definitely like at some, like if you see this is the use case where we can definitely like where like to expose multiple APIs, right? So we can have only one single Anypoint data service which can serve the mobile application and the web application both basically, right? So you may not need the experience layer there. You can definitely use the Anypoint data graph endpoint as the experience layer. So you, here if you are using the Anypoint data graph as a experience, as a user experience layer, you don't have to create a channel specific API. You will have a single data service which can serve the purpose of the consumer basically. Okay. So yeah, you can definitely, but I will tell you the Anypoint data graph comes with not like still it's getting mature. So basically it comes with lesser security options and all those things right now, right? So lesser security option, in that case if you want to use like complex security options like JWT and all those things, you have to go with experience layer, right? But yeah, but in future you can see the other options also, like other authentication mechanism and everything. Right now, like we, by default GraphQL can be used to modify the data, but right now like Anypoint data graph is not supporting any modification or any modification or on any updation of data. Basically it only support get method. Okay, Santoshi, you mean normal scenario we may have to build the experience API, but with data graph it will be one. Correct, Lalit, yes. So clearly, like if you have a get method and where like your mobile application, your web application are consuming same API, only difference is that like mobile application require 3 field and web application require 7 field. In that case, you will create a separate API. But there is a no need to create the separate API. You can use the single data service endpoint, Anypoint data graph endpoint. Like you can send a query to the Anypoint data graph, and any rest things will be taken care by the Anypoint data graph. No, Lalit. By default, GraphQL is capable of doing update, deletion, post, and all those things. But Anypoint data graph right now doesn't do updation, deletion, or modification of data. It just fetch the data. No, we cannot. We cannot. Like you have read it wrong somewhere, Lalit. We cannot do that. With GraphQL you can do that. Right now like Anypoint data graph it has been launched recently, right? Definitely in future you can see the modification of data. I don't know, but we can retrieve the data with Anypoint data graph. You cannot do other uh, you cannot do other operation. You can only do the get operation. That's it. It's a limitation or it's a restriction in Anypoint data graph. Let me go with second slide. Use case 2. So let's consider I have a scenario where you have to call the multiple REST endpoints or want to fetch the data from multiple REST point. And each API will respond with a JSON payload, and GraphQL or Anypoint Datagraph will aggregate all the response and send back to the required data to the client. And below is the illustration. So basically, I have an open banking API which have a accounts endpoint, balances endpoint, and the transaction endpoint basically. Okay. So with Anypoint Datagraph, so I have this web application and I have this mobile application basically. Okay, so what happened, like I want to fetch the details from multiple endpoint basically. So I can request, like, from account I want this field, from balances I want this field, from transaction I want this field. So I will do this request to the Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph will call accounts, balances, and transaction API in the parallel basically, or in concurrent way basically. It will fetch the result from all the API. It will do the aggregation and send the response back to the client. In mobile, like, it can request for the fewer fields basically. So where, like, it was saying, for account I want ID, first name, last name, and mobile. For balance I want balance, time, and amount. For transaction I want ID, transaction, and date. So it can request to the same Anypoint data graph endpoint. Anypoint data graph will do the orchestration or choreography of the calls in the concurrent manner basically. And like, generally, and this API, all API will respond back to Anypoint data graph. Anypoint data graph will do the aggregation, will, and it also remove the fields which is not requested in the query, and send the result back to the client. So these are the two use cases, and we will see the live demonstration on this use cases now. Any question before that? Yeah, Vikas. See, it's a managed service, and like GraphQL expose its own endpoint basically. So it doesn't deploy any application in runtime manager basically. It doesn't do. It's a separately managed. You are right. No, Somil, transformation is not supported in Anypoint data graph basically. Yeah, Lalit, you will see, like, Lalit, I will show you in demonstration basically. Okay, Manesh, like, security we will see. Okay, so let me start with some of the use cases. So where is my Anypoint data graph? Yeah. So here is my Anypoint data graph. Let me explain. I have a design center. So this is my open banking API. So one of the requirement is that you have to write RAML or open API specification, and those API must be published to the Anypoint exchange. This is one of the requirement basically. Not this one. Yeah, I have this particular API which having accounts, like transaction, balances, endpoint. And like, you can see the few endpoints here. Okay. So, and this API I have, like, exposed to the, I have published to the Anypoint exchange, and also I have enabled the auto discovery for this API. So you can see that this open banking API here. Next thing, I have also deployed this API in my runtime manager, and let me show that this API, so I will say HTTP, and I will say API accounts. This is my API. So let me fetch the result. I got this result back. So I have some few accounts for this particular API, but I, like, my mobile application doesn't require all the field, and my web application doesn't require all the field. They require some separate field basically. How can I do that? Simple. Like, we will go with Anypoint data graph approach. So basically, let me go to data graph. So you can simply say add API. Then, as I mentioned, your API must be written in RAML or Open API specification. Then it should publish to the Anypoint exchange. So this is the prerequisite Open Banking API. I will say next, configure URL. So I will select the latest version, and I will say confirm selection. then it will automatically add the API instance which is available in API manager. But if your API is not present in API manager, or like it is located somewhere else, so you can simply say add new URL. You can add your own URL. Let's consider if you have some non-MuleSoft application where you have to enable Anypoint Datagraph, so you can like you can provide the base URL of that particular non-MuleSoft application. But I will go with this Anypoint platform URL. Okay. Next, provide the authentication. So we are going to provide the authentication for underlying API. So right now my underlying API doesn't have any authentication. So right now for underlying API, it supports four kind of authentication: basic auth, client ID enforcement via header, client ID enforcement via query parameter, and if you have any custom header, you can add it. But right now I have a no authentication for my underlying API. I will say preview schema. So these are the method name, accounts, account balance. So it automatically generated depending on your RAML basically. Okay. So I in my RAML I have like around 5 methods. So it generated method name for 5 methods basically. Okay. And it all so these are the parameter. This parameter can be URI parameter or like query params. So it will list it there. Okay. Then I will say edit schema. So I don't want to do anything. I will say next, add to unified schema. Proceed to unified schema. So it's very simple. So I've added that. Okay. So you can see what are the fields and everything in this particular account type, all these things. So I'm waiting. This is updating. So let me check if there's any question. Mane security aspects I will show you. Okay. See, like I will not talk about the license basically. That is not. Uh, I'm not aware. Like you need to talk with the MuleSoft sales guy, like for licensing basically. So I think it have a separate license. So you need to talk with MuleSoft sales or marketing people, right? So yeah, I don't think it's come under premium or like premium license, but it's a separate license for that. So that is my understanding. I cannot say 100%, but you need to check with MuleSoft, on that. But I will talk about security aspects definitely. Lalit, you need to create a new trial account. In that, you will able to see it. Okay, you create a new trial account. Have you when you created that trial account? So generally, if you are creating a new trial account, and you will able to see that no, not long back. You need to create a new one basically. You are saying long back. Your trial account must be expired, Lalit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So you can create a new trial account basically with same email ID. You can create a new trial account, and you will see Anypoint Datagraph in that. Okay. So I'm waiting for so it's a managed service, so it will not going to deploy anything into runtime manager, and you don't have to worry about scalability and all those things. There are some restrictions. We will discuss about those restrictions in upcoming slides. Now you can see your application is updated, your API is updated here. You can say run a query, right? So now I will run the query. So you have to run a query, then it will give us some intelligence. I want to fetch accounts and account on customer ID, and I can say 123. And what are the field I want to fetch? First name, last name, ID, address, phone, company. Yeah. So I will requesting this. So I got only the data which I have requested. You can see that, right? I got only the data I have requested. What can you tell me one more? We are getting one more advantage here. What is that advantage? Now I don't want address and ID, right? My mobile want only first name, phone, and company. So I will just get first name, phone, and company. Can you tell me we are getting one more advantage? Anybody notice that? Anyone? Code change is fine. So Suraj, like with enterprise account, you will not able to see Anypoint Datagraph. You have to buy the license for that. See, we are getting one advantage: sorting of data. Basically, the way the order in which you are requesting the data, you are getting the order data in same order, right? So basically, if I say I want company name at the top, basically, right? So you can see that you are getting the data in the order in which you are requesting. So it does a sorting of data for you basically, right? So you don't have to worry about that also. So that is also a cool feature provided by Anypoint Datagraph. Okay. So we have covered one advantage. Apart from that, let me open the slide before we go to third use cases. So I want to show you something else, like something more. So basically, Anypoint Datagraph also provide a GUI where you can measure the performance of your API basically, right? With a single UI, you can measure the performance of the API. You can also performance like response time for that particular API, like logs and all those things. Okay. Apart from that, somebody told me like what are the authentication or security supported. So right now, for underlying API, it supported basic authentication, client ID enforcement via headers. We have seen that, right? Client ID enforcement via query param and the custom. So these are the authentication mechanisms supported by the GraphQL. Okay. So we will see this how to trace and monitor the API. Before that, we have seen the first use case. Now I will show the second use case where we have to call the multiple endpoints basically, right? And Anypoint data graph will do the aggregation, do the orchestration of the call, and then send the response back to the client. Let me show that. So we will use the same API, but this time we will call the multiple endpoints. So let me remove this. I will say I want to accounts by account ID. So my account ID is one. Let me check what are the account ID have one, right? Yeah. Then from account ID, I want first name, I want account type, I want last name, I want company, I want ID. Also, I want like a website. That's it. Now I also want a transaction. So I will say account. First I will balances. Then I can say account ID one. In balance I want amount. Then I want balance type. Okay. Then I also want the relative transactions. Account transactions by account ID. In transaction I want description. I want ID, transaction date. I want amount. Yeah. So what I'm doing, I'm fetching like So what will happen here? It will call accounts endpoint. So let me show the endpoints, all the endpoints. So first, I have a separate endpoint for balances. So balances will be one.
Something is gone wrong.
Yeah, I'm wrong. Okay, it's accounts slash one slash balances. Yeah. So we got a balances for account one. Then I also want to fetch a transactions. I got the transactions, and I just want to fetch the accounts for like So I got the account. So these are the three different endpoints. So with a single request, we will be going to call three different endpoints, and like graph Anypoint data graph will do the orchestration of call, fetch the data, do the aggregation, send the response back to the client. Okay. So let me run it. See here you can see it like So I got accounts, account detail. I have requested this field. I got those field. I requested balance different balances for that account. I got that balances, and I requested all the transactions for that account. I got those transactions also, right? Right. But this name doesn't looks good, like no. So you can put the alias. So now this looks better. And this is the default tag always come with Anypoint data graph or GraphQL basically. You will always see data under data. You will see all your result basically. Okay. Now let me trace a query. Okay, I will run this again. Okay, let me show you what happened. Generally, if you see it call the accounts API, it call the balance API, it call the transaction, everything happen in parallel basically. It doesn't wait like send the request to account, get the response, then call balance, then call transaction. It doesn't happen in that way. It will call the all the APIs or all the endpoint in the concurrent manner basically. You can see that, right? And the whole request get completed in around 49 milliseconds, so you can see that like the multiple API has been called in the concurrent manner basically. right? So that is how you can check the response. Like, let consider there might be possibility like your response is getting delay, and you want to know that like which API is responding slow. So this is the place you can test, you can send the query from here, and you can test it which API is sending the response slowly basically. Okay, any question on this, two use cases? So Lalit, the related API scenario will come. Okay, so if one fails, like if one fail, you will get the payload for two APIs and you will get the error for third API.
Jitendra,
Hmm.
this is Ravi Jitendra.
Hmm.
Can we invoke one data graph from another one data graph?
You
Is
can
this so?
definitely do that. You can definitely do that. For that, if you want to invoke one data graph from another data graph, that will be a simple API call for data graph, right? You can do that.
Okay, okay. There was an ask from other guy. That's why I just want to check with. Yeah, good then. Yeah.
Rajesh, that scenario will become okay. So we can have some relationship between we can define the relationship between the data set where we have a primary key, foreign key, all those kind of things. So we will do that. Okay, I will show that example also. Okay, so let me check the question. Yeah, data transformation doesn't taken care at any point data graph. You cannot do the data transformation. That is right. Yes, I can. You can add up to 256 API. You can add up to. I will tell you. You can add more and more API. Okay, up to two. So it will like as I mentioned, like you can. It will give a single data service for all your APIs. How many APIs you are adding. It will give a single data service endpoint.
Ravi, answer to your question. One more restrictions is there. Okay, Ravi, you're able to hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so per organization, you'll get only one endpoint for your data graph. So right now, your Anypoint platform is supporting only one instance. Okay, so your use case, I don't know where you'll be using, but
No,
there'll
no.
be
I think
only
Ravi's question is that like one
yeah, yeah.
organization has to call the other organization GraphQL endpoint, right, Ravi? That is what your question,
If
like, right?
may not be the case, maybe within the it's not my question. Someone asked me, but I don't
Okay,
have answer. I'm trying
yeah.
to get it. I
So
think
yeah.
they never said that it is one organization and another organization.
Mhm.
Basically, I think he's looking for like a modular, like one data graph is calling another data graph.
Wait.
Yeah.
Ravi, you cannot call it. Okay, one
Oh,
data graph endpoint cannot call the other data graph endpoint. Why? I
okay.
will tell you. I will tell you the reason for that.
Yeah.
Data graph, like if you are calling underlying endpoint, right, on the post method, it doesn't support. It only support get. And when you are passing the body, you have to use the post method, right, Ravi? So
Yeah.
in that case, one data graph endpoint cannot call the other data graph endpoint. That is 100% sure, Ravi.
Okay. Okay. Great.
And there should be a valid. I mean, this is a valid point that we cannot do that, and maybe over time when it will mature and
And
all that.
correct. And Ravi, if you see the architecture, like
Yeah.
we only pass a query, right? But like
Yeah.
we pass a query, right?
Yeah.
Correct. But the problem with anypoint data, like one anypoint data graph has to call other anypoint data graph endpoint, right? So then we have to use the post method. Right now, anypoint data graph doesn't support the post method for underlying API.
Yeah.
That is the answer.
Yeah. I agree that right. Only get right. Yeah.
Only get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Thanks, Jitendra. Thanks,
Yeah.
Sar.
Yeah. So let me some restriction before I go with third demonstration. I will show some restriction basically. So Anypoint data graph supports REST API with RAML or Open API specification, which we have discussed. It only support GET method, and you can like somebody asked me like we so up to how many APIs we can add? We can add up to 250 APIs like in your per unified schema. So basically in your Anypoint data graph, in your one Anypoint data graph instance, you can up to 250 API basically. Then the total fields like in 250 API should not go more than 60,000 fields basically. Okay, so at the Anypoint data graph restrict downstream REST API call to like you can do maximum up to 150 concurrent or ongoing call for unified schema. So there can be like 150 concurrent, like you can request like see it's simple in simple like if you are sending 151 call and if 150 call is running in parallel, right, so 151 call will get rejected basically. So 5-second timeout per call. So basically, the Anypoint data graph do the orchestration of call, and let me show this 5-second one. So I will show with this example. So my Anypoint data graph call accounts. So if account doesn't respond within 5 seconds, so it will throw the exception, data exception basically. Okay, but balance and transaction response is successful, so it will show the balance and transaction response, but the like timeout for the accounts API, that is the 5 seconds. Okay, and the maximum of 5 MB of a response data. So you can have up to response data of 5 MB, not more than that. Anypoint data graph limits the query service to 30 seconds timeout of query and maximum of 100 selected field. Okay, these are the two good things. So let me show. If we are doing the orchestration of multiple call, the call, like one query must be complete within 30 seconds. If it is taking 31 seconds, it will throw the data exception back to the client basically. Okay, so those kind of error we will get basically. And 100 fill, so like 100 fills, I will tell you what does this 100 fill means. So you have this kind of fill, like, so this is one fill, two fill, three fill, four fill, five, six, seven, eight. So it should not exceed more than 100 fills basically. Okay, per query. So these are some restriction. So if your API is not performing well, you should not add to the Anypoint data graph, because the timeout is 5 seconds, right? If your API is fast, like can able to respond within 5 seconds, then you need to add you can use the Anypoint data graph for those API. If some API is taking 10 minutes to retrieve the data, it doesn't make sense to add those APIs basically, right? Let me use the third use cases. Before that, if any question.
Yeah, Jackie, we have few questions. One is how it is going to manage the different endpoints, because different endpoints in terms of data graph or the APIs.
The backend APIs.
Backend
So
APIs,
many.
you need to add the APIs, and there you can manage those endpoints. You will get an option to add the URL.
Okay.
See, because when we configure the schema, unified schema, at that time we put the endpoint, right? We have put the endpoint.
Yes.
I
Exactly.
will show you.
You can go to data graph and show where we add the
I
APIs.
will show you,
Yeah.
because I will add one more demo where I will show you.
And
Can we call multiple API? Surya, the demo is there. Like, we can add the multiple API. I will show the in third demo basically. Okay, we can do that. We will do it.
sure.
Okay, so let me first. I will go to data graph. You can keep, but I will delete it right now. I will clean this everything, and we will start from the third demo. I like to start from scratch. You can keep it, doesn't matter. Like you can keep up to 250 APIs, but I will remove it for now. That's fine. So let me explain you third scenario. So somebody asked me multiple APIs. So I have a accounts API, I have a customers API. So see, like I have a mobile application, I have a web application. So initially what happened, like customers just want to face the account detail, and account detail have some account related detail, right? And the customer is fine with that. But later point of that, the customer came and told he also want the customer detail for that particular account, right? So in that case, what he will do basically, you will going to write a process layer where you will do the orchestration of call. You have a multiple API, accounts and customer. Then you do the aggregation and send the response back to the experience layer, and from experience layer you send response back to the client. That is what you will do. With Anypoint data graph, you don't have to do that. So you can just add the API unified schema, and set up the relationship between accounts and the customer. In customer, the customer ID will be the primary key. In accounts, account ID will be the primary key. In accounts, the customer ID will be the foreign key. Okay, so let me show that first. So I have accounts API. So let me open that. Where is my instance? Okay, so I have a two API, customer API and the accounts API. Customer, yeah, this is my endpoint, accounts API. Yeah, I have this. So I can say send request. So I got all the accounts basically. So these are my accounts. Okay, now I want my customer also. Let me face the customer also. So these are my customer. Here the customer ID is the primary key. In accounts data, your account ID is a primary key and the customer ID is the foreign key. So I want like if somebody send a request for account 123, right? I want this account type and the customer ID, one detail like first name, last name, address, age, and country. So I want all this information. How we can set up the relationship between those? Okay. So first thing, I have already created a RAML. Let me show that also. You go to exchange, sorry, design center. So in accounts, I have a two endpoints, fetch all the accounts and fetch the single accounts by ID. Okay, fetch the single accounts by ID. So I have two methods. Same thing with customer. I have a customers and fetch the customer accounts. Then I have registered these two APIs in the API manager, and also I publish into Anypoint Exchange. So this is my customer API. Somebody asked me like, here we give the implementation URI endpoint. Basically, we can give it here, right, in a consumer endpoint. So like this is my implementation endpoint. So I provided the consumer endpoint basically. Okay. The next thing, I will go to my Anypoint Datagraph. I will add API. Now first I will create customer API. Next, configure URL. So here you need to configure conform selection. So this is your API in a API manager. Then you can use like I already provided this as a consumer endpoint in my API manager. So I can select this instance. If you have a different URL, you can simply add the new URL here basically. But I will use the API manager one URL or like the application which is deployed to my runtime manager. I will say provide authentication. I don't have any authentication for underlying API. Previous schema. So now, yeah, this is preview. Now here, I need to define a primary key basically, customer. So you can click here, customers, and you can say enable collaboration. And this is the method through which you can fetch the single customer. You at least you require one method which can fetch the single or unique record basically. Next, then you can say customer ID is my primary key. Okay, and you can confirm. That's it. And add to next unified schema. Proceed to unified schema. Let get it deployed. Before that, if any question, I can take it. Yes. See, don't you need to select it? You don't have to create it. Basically, you need to set up some. If you are calling the multiple API, you need to define the relationship between for both the API. Basically, you can use first name as also primary key, but it depends. Like you need to be make sure like you are setting up any unique identifier as a primary key. Basically, like we have done it here. So this is my customer. And if you see the customer ID become a primary key in my data set. Okay, you can see that. So let's wait while it's deploying. Then I will add the second API also. Let it be get deployed. I will use the account API. In account ID is the primary and customer ID is the foreign key. So configure next URL. So I will say latest version of my instance, and this is the URL I provided as a consumer endpoint in API manager. I'll say next provide authentication. So there is a no authentication for my underlying API. So I will select no auth, preview schema. Everything is fine. Edit schema. I will say enable collaboration, accounts by account ID. Next, here I will say account ID is my primary key. Confirm. Then we have to set up some relation. We have to do the link. So account needs to be linked with a customer, right? And in customer ID is primary key. In account, what is my foreign key? Customer ID is my foreign key. Okay. So this is my foreign key basically. No, I don't want to hidden it. So you can like it is was saying yeah, foreign key will be hidden in the schema. I don't want to keep it hidden. I will keep this as visible. And don't forget to click on this save. Generally what happens, we forget to click on this save and we just say add to unified schema, and we keep on troubleshooting why this relation is not working and all those things. Okay, so make sure like you set up this relationship properly here in link configuration. So here I'm saying I want to fetch the account and related customer details. So that's why I'm saying the customer ID is the foreign key in the customers, and like in accounts the customer ID is the sorry customer ID is the primary key in customer data set or customer API, and customer ID is the foreign key in accounts API. Okay, I will say save changes, and then I will say add to unified schema, proceed to unified schema. So it will add, so it will take few minutes. So before that, any question? I'm waiting for application to get deployed. Guys, I will after that I will show one more topic. See, I like I you will not find that, but still I will show you basically like how if you want to enable JWT policies, or currently I will first it only support two kind of authentication: client ID enforcement or like rate limiting. I will show that. But if you want to enable any other kind of API policies, or how can we do that, we will see it. Yeah, Siva. I'm just waiting for my application to get deployed.
Yeah, since it's taking time, I want to add one point, Jitendra.
Yeah.
So the data graph, one more limitation is there. The data graph, it returns always 200. Okay, so monitoring this guy is little difficult. Okay, the endpoint of the data graph. Only if you have any errors in your, endpoint is not reachable or any errors with the endpoints, only you will see those things in the response. But the status code of the endpoint will be always 200. That's the point I wanted to add.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashish, for adding the point. So, guys, I will go to run query. It takes at least 2-3 minutes for deployment, and I will remove all this thing. Now, first, I want to fetch the accounts, and account ID, customer ID, account type. Let me check what are the fields written by accounts. Yeah. So these are the three fields. Let me run a query. So we got this, like account ID, customer ID, but I also want a related customer details. So for that, what I can do, customers. Now it is showing customers also. Then under customer, I can say first name, I can say last name, I can say customer ID, age, country. I want address, so I can run a query. So you can see now you are also getting a related customer detail. So you can see customer ID one, you got the customer ID one detail. So you can see you are getting the related customer details also, right? But the what is the disadvantage, like if you are fetching 1000 account, so it will do the 1000 call to the customer by ID method, because every time it has to fetch the customer details, right? For this customer ID one, so let it fetch the account detail, then it will fetch the customer ID customer detail for ID one, like that it will do for all the calls. I can show that, I can show that in this run query. So you can see it fetch 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. For every time it does a customer call. You can see that every time for every query it does a customer call. See, it does it customer call, right? It has to do it. So like it's fine for small like 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 record. If we are getting 1000 record, doesn't works. So make sure, like, but It works here very well. Like if you want to fetch a single account with the customer details, then it's good. Like accounts by account ID. Account ID is 123, I think. The customers. Something is not right. It's account ID, account type, customer ID, I guess the customers, first name. Here it's good, like everything is good, no issues. Okay, so you can see you got a customer and as well as the customer. Let me show a unified schema also once again. And like let me go to data graph. I want to show one more scenario. So you can say list of APIs and you can see like accounts and customer. You go to accounts API. Like in accounts API you can click on accounts, not accounts query. You click here. So here you can see account ID is the foreign primary key, and here you can see this symbol, which means it also have a customer it will also call the customer API, and you can click here. It will give the what are the fields we can get it from the customers. Those things, all those things. Let me go to customer. Yeah. So you can see all the link configurations, everything here. So primary key. This is the foreign key. You can see this symbol, which means like it will also call the customer's object basically, and here you can see the link for that. Okay, now I want to give one more scenario. Let's consider run. I will go to runtime manager. I will leave it. If my customer API is down, what will happen? Let me stop my customer API. Okay, let me go to data graph, run a query. Let me send the query. So if you see, like you got the account data back, but for customer data, it will show null and it will throw the exception. So like it will show like exception while fetching the data. Like line 7, like it not able to like it gives that this kind of exception back to you. It doesn't give proper exception exactly what is, but it gave a timeout exceeded basically, because your generally API is not reachable. It will definitely time out, right? So it have say timeout of around 30 seconds, right? The whole query doesn't respond back within 13 seconds, get timeout. But you get the data for accounts basically, but not for the customers. Okay, so let me show that also. If you have multiple API, what will happen? Let's see. So you got the account details every time. You get all the account detail, but error for all the customers basically. So you have accounts, so you will get the 5 errors because it may have done the call for the 5 times to the customers basically. Okay, yeah. So let me again start the application. Any question before I will show one more demo. So let me start the application. If you have any question. Okay, so guys, I will show one more thing, like how can I enable us different policies basically. So I will go to data graph. In data graph, I can do one thing. I can say run query. Okay, I want to copy the endpoints. So basically this is the endpoint of your graph or data service or GraphQL or data graph, whatever you call it. These are the client ID and client enforcement. Okay, I'll keep as it is. Before that, there is a one new thing in your Anypoint data graph, which is data graph administration. So by default, client ID enforcement is enabled. SLA rate based limiting, and like you can disable the authentication also. So these are the support. This kind authentication mechanism is supported for your Anypoint data graph. But if you want to enable the other policies, I have a workaround. I'm not sure like whether it's 100% correct, but we have a workaround. But I will show you like what is that workaround. Can anybody predict it? So basically, we can create a API proxy on the top of Anypoint Datagraph endpoint, okay, and we can enable the policies uh, on that proxy API basically. Okay, so list of API. Let me copy this query also. I will be requiring this query. So basically, let me test directly on graph endpoint. And go to Postman. I can say post. And I can copy this payload. I can go to body. The body I can say GraphQL. Also, you have to pass client ID and the client secret. That is the authentication. Yeah, you got all the accounts and the customer details successfully. But let me show you one thing, like where it is. Yeah. So what I will do, I will go to API manager. Okay. Under the API manager, I will say create new API. I will say data graph proxy API. Select type HTTP API. Continue. And I will copy this much of the endpoints. Okay. Not complete endpoint, only base path. And I will say Mule4 endpoint with proxy. I will provide proxy endpoint here. Under advanced option, everything is default. Let's say save. I can select latest version. I will say data graph demo proxy. Okay. Deploy. So it will deploy the application. So now instead of that, okay, this is my implementation URL, and it will deploy one application into runtime manager. This is the application. Let me copy this endpoint. I will remove this client ID and client secret. Okay. So I'm waiting for application to get deployed first. Siva, just 5-10 minutes more, okay? I hope it's fine.
No worries, no worries. Go ahead.
Because this is something new, like, so like
Right.
people ask question like how to enable the policies, different policies,
Correct.
Okay, it's deployed. Okay, so let me send the request. It should give me an unauthorized 401. Okay, it's method not allowed. It's HTTP data graph. Yeah, it gave me 401 unauthorized, right? Why? Because there is the authentication between proxy and the data graph. So we need to send client ID and the client secret. So how can we do that? So I let me do that. So basically, I don't want to give the data graph client ID and client secret to end customer. I want to enable basic authentication for end customer, or like JWT validation or OAuth policy for end customer. But I don't want to give a client ID and a client secret for data graph to the customer basically. So for that, what I can do, I can go to API manager. I will go to my data graph proxy. I will go to policy and I can add, generally we had client ID and the client secret in the header, right? Okay, apply new policy. So I will add header injection policy, configure policy. I can say client ID. So what will happen before sending the request to the graph, Anypoint data graph, it will add a client ID and the client secret. This policy means, okay. Apply. So it will take around 30-40 seconds for policy to get applied. I can check the runtime manager logs. Generally, it shows in runtime manager logs when policies got applied. It's still not applied. Let me check. Still policy is not applied. Yeah, we got the response successful. So policy is applied and we got the successful response, but still we need to enable authentication on the top of this proxy. So what I can do, I can go to API manager. Right now I will not apply OAuth policy. It will take a lot of time. I will apply some simple basic authentication policy for now. So you can apply any policy, like I can use basic authentication, a simple one. I can give password as an admin. Username, password, both are the same. Apply. Okay. So let's wait while the policy get applied. Again, I will go to runtime manager. Let me check if policy is applied. Yeah. So you can see you got the 401 now. So what is happening? The authentication between client and proxy is not happening now. Why? Because we haven't passed the username and the password. I can go to authorization. I can go to basic auth and I can pass admin. Okay, that send the request. Got the successful response. So that is how, like, you can apply a different policy on the top of your Anypoint data graph and proxy, and you have to ensure that the authentication between proxy and the Anypoint data graph needs to be added by a client, or like a header injection policy where you need to add client ID and the client secret. Yeah. So yeah, so that is all about Anypoint data graph. If you have any question, just let me know. Otherwise, thank you.
Guys, feel free to ask questions if you have any. Nobody? No questions?
Oh, what proxy question mark? What, like, Lalit, what does this mean? Proxy question mark. What does this mean?
I think
Asking now what is the possible, so that time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, trivia quiz will be definitely there.
We will have it.
yes, yes, yes.
So I hope like you understand like what are the different things we can do with Anypoint Datagraph and what are the different use cases where we can use the Anypoint Datagraph.
I'll wait for one more minute for questions. All right. Let me know if you guys are able to see the screen. We'll do a trivia section. I currently don't have Kahoot, so we will be doing it manually, and we can start with that. All right. First question of trivia quiz. All set? What is the possible nesting level of query in data graph? Put your answers in the chat. I guess everybody missed it. Keep going there, keep going. The answers are still wrong. I will show the question again. What is the possible nesting level of query in data graph? It's strange that nobody got it correct yet. Not no correct answers. Exactly. I guess people have not paid attention clearly. We have
You don't blame me.
all right. So Hariharan has given the correct answer. He has the right answer. It's 6.
Awesome, Ariyaran.
Yeah. All right. So Hari, we'll stop at Hariharan for this. Hariharan, ping me your mail ID, please. I'll make a note somewhere.
Good, Hari. At least somebody understand. Hariharan is there actually.
Somebody was paying attention. All right.
So it
Hariharan,
saves
can
me.
you ping your email ID, please? I'm not sure if he's able to listen.
Yeah, maybe we can, Shiva, we can note down his name. Maybe at last we can ask.
Hariharan, right.
Yeah.
All right.
I can help you if you want.
I'll put his name here. But Hariharan, images. All right. Coming to the second question. How many APIs can be added to? Sorry, how many data graphs can be added to Anypoint platform sandbox?
We got many answer.
Lalit, your answers are not counted.
Devendra, how come?
Because it's not trial account, it's a overall like it's if you are taking also enterprise license, there's a 250 in one unified, right?
Yes.
So you got the answer, right? You can take it.
So, what is the answer? Answer is one. That's true. And Lalit, if you want to give that credit to someone else, I can go ahead and give Santosh.
I did not get this. Why?
I'm just asking. Just kidding. All right. So we give this to Lalit then.
Only one instance, I think, right?
It's just one.
Yes. We have discussed, right? Ravi asked one question, no? He
Yes.
answered that time.
The last question of the day: how many unified schema operations are supported by Datagraph?
Lalit is asking why. Lalit, don't worry. Siva will give a prize to you also. Because Lalit has done a lot of hard work. He asked a lot of
We
questions.
are
Like,
done a lot of
yeah,
questions. Deserves
at
that.
least he deserve it.
Yes,
There,
we do.
there has to be one prize for those guys, man, who ask maximum questions. You should count that
See,
guy
generally
also.
I do it. I generally do it. Like, I generally do it. Oh my! During the
And
Surat
one
meetup.
next time we will choose the best question also, and we'll give an award for that.
So if you see Ashish, I select 4 people actually every time.
Okay, 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 okay. I will start that in my meetup also. Then.
We should do that.
So
So how
what will
many?
you give? So what will you give to the fourth guy?
Same thing.
Same. Guys are not, you guys are not reading the question. It's very simple English. How many unified schema operations are supported by Datagraph?
Or simply how many API is supported in Unify schema, right?
No, hold
Okay.
on.
No, I got a question. Like you are saying,
Hariharan, you got the answer right, but
Hmm.
I guess Hariharan gets the other one also. Now people are going to copy. All right, all right. Uh, so
Somebody's writing 256, man.
I'm not sure why people are so confused. And 250 has been unanimous answer throughout.
250 API can be added to a unified schema to up to 250 APIs.
I guess I write something complex? How many unified schema operations? That is three only, right? So we can link, merge, and enable collaboration. All right. So this goes to Venkata again.
Uh,
Yeah, so people are getting confused with unify schema, then operations, and then API here. Okay, so you create confusion. Wow.
see,
That is how I take interviews.
No, the final question has to be like that. Okay, I like that question.
so, so how many people clear the interview then?
Very few. Very few. My rejection rate is very high.
Then I will not give interview to you.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome. So, guys, we have like 5 10. We can spend 5 10 minutes on networking. Go ahead if you want to introduce yourself, or if you are joining this Noida meetup for the very first time. Go ahead, introduce yourself. I guess everybody has pretty much access to speak. And also, please, we'll do a screenshot of all attendees. So I'll stop sharing, and you guys can turn on your videos. I will like it. Lalit, you too.
Hey, say 1 2 3 and click, man. Okay.
My background is not so good.
That's fine.
Hey,
I,
we should have blur option here, man. You know.
I think I will
Your
talk to. I'll
your
talk to
background is good, Lalit.
Mariana and Sabrina.
Who told you, Lalit, your background is not good? It's good.
I,
All right, guys, go
Shiva.
ahead. Share your videos. What is
Not
it?
video.
All right. I'll give a minute to people to open.
All winners needs to start the video. Otherwise, Siva will not give a prize.
Yeah. So Shiva has a control now. Okay.
Venkata is open. Lalit is open. Only the remaining is Hariharan.
Venkata, come down little bit. We see half only. Yeah, Akshay, Agrawal. Good, good.
I can't see the options. Okay, sorry, sorry, see the options. Oh, God.
Option for what?
So can you make him presenter,
I,
Hariharan?
I think I pretty much made everybody, but I just still messed up. I'll make it.
Sham Kulkarni. Why you are not showing?
Yeah, you open. Hariharan also open.
Hariharan, hi.
Hariharan, good job. You are the only one who paid attention.
Yeah, thanks. Even I attended the last week of your session.
Oh.
And
Next week also there is a session. You can attend that also.
Don't start the comparison. Huh?
no. I don't want comparison because I also watched this one also because since I also able to recall those things also. So that's why.
See, boss will be always right, okay? So Jackie is the boss.
Jack,
Yeah, that I know already because I've been attending his sessions.
Yeah.
No, that's
So
good.
next,
That's good. Good to see that kind of.
yeah. Next week also.
Nobody is boss. Everyone is boss. So no.
No, next week also there, okay? So you can attend that also.
All right. I guess nobody else is turning on their videos. I'll take the last screenshot. You guys can smile. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for joining in and making this session interactive. Jackie, thanks as always. Ashish,
Yeah.
Lalit, thanks for joining in.
No
It's always
issues.
good to
Thanks.
have you guys here.
Explain the last question. Maybe I missed it. The last question and the answer.
What was the last question, Lalit?
The unified, where you confused, you confuse everywhere, every other people. I missed it.
How do we unify schemas? So how do we unify schemas, right? I mean, if we have three schemas in terms of accounts, customers, and open banking, let's suppose, right? So how do you merge or how do you link them, right? So there is linking of two things, two schemas. Then you can merge two schemas, and you have to, of course, enable the collaboration in terms of designing or defining the primary key and important.
Finally, it was very tough, okay?
Shiva, you should not do like this way, okay?
Yes,
From
yes,
next
yes,
time.
yes. Yes. Will not you answer, okay?
Keep it simple.
There has to be one more, no? Nota.
If I go
Nota.
to interviews, people ask me tough questions. What I can do?
Yeah,
Don't
people
go
are
to
people,
interview
man.
Anyhow, nobody is hiring me.
You're setting, high expectation, right? So
Yeah.
that's
You
why.
want big money, na? Who will
Big
hire?